Hey guys, this is Sports with Dylan. Today we had a trade. A trade we've been waiting for quite a while. Jeff Petry was traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins. The trade consisted of Jeff Petry and Ryan Pulling both going down south. Don't know why I phrased it like that. I mean, Pittsburgh is south of Montreal, but not by a ton. In exchange for Mike Matheson and a 2023 fourth-round pick. Not a bad deal. The Canadiens needed to ship out Petry. He's a 34-year-old that isn't going to go anywhere on the Canadiens. Well, going to Pittsburgh does surprise me a bit. You see, Pittsburgh has an old roster. Their three best players are both in their mid-30s. Maybe not their three best anymore, but Malkin, Crosby, and Letang, all in their mid-30s. And so is Petry. So a Letang-Petry defensive line would be very interesting, I'll admit. But at the same time, both of them are older, and both have had injuries in the past. So if I were the Penguins and trying to strengthen my defense, then I'd go and say, hey, I'm going to go trade for someone young, like Jacob Chichern. Okay, maybe they can't afford him, but even Tyson Barrie. Someone like him who's a solid player and yet isn't that old and isn't going to cost a ton. Neither did Jeff Petry, but Jacob Chichern would. So I would have gone Tyson Barrie is what I would have done if I were the Pittsburgh Penguins. Because he's younger and he doesn't have many injuries in history. So he's a solid player, and he would be great with Letang. But now you got two older players on probably your first defensive line. The Penguins' defense isn't amazing. So you got two older players on your first line. That's a bit shifty, because when one of them gets injured, which one of them probably will, who steps in? And that's the biggest question. The Penguins do not have a very good farm team. They haven't had the picks that other teams have because they've been winning so much. Then they've always had picks in later rounds. So it's tough to say what exactly the Penguins were thinking here, but in the short term, the Penguins strengthened their team. In the long term, they just made it a bit older. And that's the biggest issue, because the Penguins aren't exactly in a position to compete in the short term. Now, they'll probably make the playoff spot, because there's only two other good teams in their division, the Rangers and the Hurricanes. Besides that, there's not much competition. I've talked about this multiple times. But they're still not in the position to win a Stanley Cup, like some other teams are, that could have traded for Jeff Petry. So, I'm not quite sure I fully understand this trade from the part of Pittsburgh. But, from Montreal's side, I couldn't understand it more. Jeff Petry, like I said, is getting up there in age. So, trade him for a pick and a younger player, that makes so much sense. Because the Canadiens, even though they traded for Kirby Dach, which I made a video about and will leave a link to in the description, they're still not that amazing of a team. Now, they'll be better than last year with Kirby Dach, but they still won't be a Stanley Cup contender. But, in a couple of years' time, you don't know what that fourth-round pick could become. So, that could become the league's future superstar. Super unlikely, like crazy unlikely, but he could still be a solid player on the Canadiens. So, now they got a young player that might be able to help them win their Stanley Cup. But again, this is a fourth-round pick, so it's highly unlikely he even makes it to the Canadiens. And if he does, good for him on that aspect. But then he still has to make his way through the roster, whichever position he plays in. So, I'm not sure. The chance of him becoming a superstar is highly unlikely. The chance of him playing okay is a bit more likely. But even still, not crazy likely. But you might as well take the bet instead of holding on to a player that's definitely not going to be on the team when you're in a position to win a Stanley Cup. So, that makes so much sense to me on the Canadian side. To change the subject, I am shocked that we are multiple days through free agency, and Nazem Kadri still remains a free agent. it's likely that he'll go to Calgary. I've heard him returning to Colorado is also a possibility. But we'll have to see. I'm sure I'll be making a video about it in the next week. If not, the world has gone mad. That's for sure. But for now, thanks for watching.